Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into the quiet corner of a little village where the heart of work is not in the grand halls of kings or the loud bustle of cities, but in the steady rhythm of a single forge. Imagine the glow of an orange fire in a dim wooden hut, the smell of smoke curling out through the gaps in the thatched roof, and the sound of a hammer striking iron in patterns so even that it could almost pass for music. This is where you will be spending the evening, right at the side of a blacksmith, as his ordinary but surprisingly detailed day unfolds. And here is the funny part. You probably will not survive this as a modern guest. The heat, the soot, the sheer number of burns you would collect before lunchtime would have you fleeing for your nice, clean, air-conditioned living room. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you want to help me out even more, comment below with where you are listening from and what the local time is for you. I always find it fun to see how this sleepy little forge travels across time zones. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. The morning in the village begins with roosters calling in that half-annoying, half-comforting way. The blacksmith has been awake for a while already. He sits by the forge, stretching his arms before lifting a heavy iron poker to stir the faint remains of yesterday's coals. The forge itself is nothing fancy, just a stone hearth built low to the ground, filled with ash and soot, surrounded by tools that are blackened and roughened by years of constant use. As he stirs, little sparks leap up like tiny fireflies before quickly disappearing into the dim air. The sound of the first bellows is loud against the early silence. It is not the mechanical roar of modern machinery, but the sighing push of a leather bag that feeds air into the coals. With every squeeze, the fire grows brighter, spreading into a patch of red that soon turns into a convincing blaze. There is something hypnotic about watching it, like staring into the heart of the earth itself. Villagers rely on this fire, not just for iron tools, but as a center of warmth and reassurance. As the flames settle into their steady glow, the blacksmith begins his first task. It is always shoes for horses. Even before any tool is sharpened, even before any hinge or latch is made, there is the animal that carried grain, pulled wagons, or brought the children to the fields. The smith knows this cycle by heart, and he does not rush it. He lays out pieces of iron, rough and heavy, waiting for them to be transformed. At this point, the rest of the village is only just beginning to stir. You hear a goat bleating from somewhere near the boundary wall, and a child's laugh echoes as she chases after it. Smoke is rising from the baker's chimney, mixing with the smell of burning oak in the forge. The air is crisp with morning coolness, though inside the smithy it is already warming up. Here is a neat fact you might enjoy. Historians tell us that in many European villages during the Middle Ages, the blacksmith was often the first person awake, even before the miller or the baker. His fire had to be coaxed back to life from near nothingness. which meant his day started earlier than anyone else's. It gave him a curious place in the social rhythm of things. He was both ordinary and essential, noticed mostly when something broke or an animal limped, yet always tied into the unseen beginnings of village life. Of course, not everyone agrees on how much power or influence such a craftsman truly had. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths were central figures of authority in rural communities, or if they were just another tradesman with soot on his face. What is certain, though, is that life would not run smoothly without him. Hinges would not open, carts would not roll, and ploughs would not break the soil. And speaking of ploughs, you can imagine how heavy they were. They dug through soil that was often more rock than dirt, and it was the smith who kept them alive. That is why his forge feels almost like a quiet heartbeat of the whole village. The people out there may not be thinking about him right now, but everything they touch in their daily life has passed through his hands at one point or another. There is also a quirky little tidbit you might not expect. In some old village traditions, blacksmiths were thought to have protective powers, not just practical ones. People believed that the ringing of the hammer against the anvil drove away evil spirits. Some even swore that sparks from the forge could keep away bad luck if they landed on your clothes. So imagine how children in this little village peek in through the doorway in the early morning, half out of curiosity, half for a secret sprinkle of luck. The smith is not thinking about luck. He is busy heating the first shoe, pressing it against the glowing coals until the iron softens enough to bend. His hammer rises and falls in steady rhythm, each strike sending a sharp ring into the still air. There is no rush here, no frantic pace. Just repetition, control, and patience. The shoe takes form slowly, shaped by strength and precision. The sound carries across the quiet streets, so that even people waking in their cottages recognize it like a morning bell. Already you can see how the day has its texture. The blacksmith is not simply banging iron. He is part of the ritual of the village waking up. You feel the shift in temperature, the gradual swell of smoke, the way sound carries through the thatched walls. You notice the tiny details too, the calluses on his palms, the streak of soot across his cheek, the way sweat gathers even though the sun has not yet climbed very high. And as the first horse is led in by a farmer, the forge begins to fully belong to the day. The morning is no longer silent. It is filled with the clang of iron, the snort of animals, the murmur of villagers, and the glowing presence of fire that will not fade until long after the stars return. The forge is alive now, and it is time for the blacksmith to gather the real stars of his craft, the tools. They look ordinary when lined up on a rough wooden bench, yet every single one has a purpose. Some are worn so thin at the handles that it is a wonder they still hold together. Others are newer, forged by his own hand, a reminder that even tools need the attention of the forge from time to time. You notice the hammers first. They are not all the same. and each one has a distinct weight. There is the heavy sledge, too much for one hand, meant for long blows that can shape large pieces of iron. Then there is the lighter hammer, the one that moves quickly, almost dancing across the glowing surface of metal. The blacksmith knows the balance of each by feel alone. He does not need to think. He just reaches, and his hand finds the right one. Next are the tongs, a whole collection of them, each pair designed to grip a specific shape. One is long and thin, good for holding nails while they are still too hot to touch. Another is broad and curved, perfect for catching the curve of a horseshoe. Some have been repaired so many times that they almost look like patchwork iron dolls, yet they work as well as the day they were first made. The anvil sits at the center of it all. It is scarred, pitted, dented from years of pounding, but it is still solid, still ready to take any blow. If the forge fire is the heart of this little workshop, then the anvil is the backbone. Without it, no strike of the hammer would find its rhythm. People in the village might not understand the subtlety of tools, but they recognize the anvil. They know its sound, and they know that sound means work is being done. You can almost feel the texture of the workshop under your fingertips. The handles of the hammers are smooth from sweat. The wooden bench is scarred with burn marks, and the bellows are patched with leather that is darker in one place where a spark once burned a hole. The tools are not just objects, they are companions. The blacksmith does not treat them as fragile treasures, but as sturdy partners in daily survival. It might surprise you to know that archaeologists have dug up blacksmith tools from over 1,000 years ago that look nearly identical to what you see here. Iron hammers, chisels, and tongs change so little over centuries that it is almost as if time forgot to improve them. Historians still argue whether this lack of change shows perfection in design or simply a lack of imagination. In medieval technology, whatever the answer, the smiths of every generation seemed content with what worked. There is a quirky belief tied to the anvil as well. In certain folk traditions, people thought anvils could store power, almost like batteries for luck. Farmers would sometimes tap an anvil lightly with a coin before planting season, convinced that the ringing sound would bless their crops. Imagine how confusing it must have been for the blacksmith, seeing a neighbor sneak into his workshop at dawn, just to knock on the anvil like it was a church bell. The blacksmith himself, though, has no time for superstitions this morning. He is testing his hammer, letting it fall against the anvil with sharp, controlled strikes. Each blow makes a different tone, and he listens carefully, as though the anvil is singing back to him. This sound is not just noise, it is communication. He can tell when the hammer face is wearing down, when the metal is shifting under the stress, when the anvil itself has grown too smooth. He adjusts accordingly. Children appear at the doorway again. They never tire of this sight. To them, the anvil is almost magical, a piece of metal that sings when struck. Their parents call them back, but they linger for a moment longer, trying to catch the rhythm of the smith's blows. Some copy the sound with little sticks outside, their playful taps a faint echo of the real music inside. By now, the tools are warmed into use, and the forge feels less like a cold shell of stones, and more like a living body. The anvil hums with each strike, the bellows breathe steadily, and the hammers fall in patterns that almost lull you into calm. It is no wonder that even people outside sometimes pause as they walk past, letting the sound wash over them like a kind of music. Think for a moment about how different this feels compared to our own lives. Today, tools are mass-produced, uniform, and often disposable. In this village, every tool is personal. Every strike of the hammer leaves a memory. Every nick in the anvil is a history of labor. If you held one of these hammers, you would sense that weight of time immediately, as if the tool itself had grown wise from years of use. And so the blacksmith keeps working. He shifts between hammer, tongs, and anvil, each tool playing its part in the morning rhythm. The fire is alive, the tools are alive, and even though this work might look ordinary to passing eyes, you realize that without these small movements, the village itself would not function. In this quiet hut, with smoke rising and sparks leaping, you see that ordinary tools become something more than objects. They are threads holding together the whole life of the community. The forge fire is not just warmth, it is the very core of the blacksmith's work. Without it, the hammers are useless, and the anvil is only a silent block of iron. Lighting the fire each morning is almost like a ritual, and once it is alive, the blacksmith treats it with the same steady care that others give to animals or crops. The glow of the fire is mesmerizing, casting orange patterns on the stone walls, flickering against the rough beams of the roof, and making the soot on the floor look like shifting shadows. The fire begins small, coaxed out of last night's embers. The smith bends low, blowing gently, then stronger, until the faint red pulse of coal becomes brighter. He sprinkles dry twigs, feeds it with chopped wood, then layers in pieces of charcoal until the fire grows deeper, hotter, and steadier. The bellows add air with slow, sighing pushes. With each squeeze, the coals flare up, and the whole forge takes on a new life. Soon the inside of the hearth is no longer dull grey, but a glowing cave of reds, oranges, and sudden bright sparks that leap out like tiny stars. Standing near it is not comfortable. The heat licks at your face, forcing sweat to bead on your forehead almost immediately. The blacksmith, however, does not flinch. His skin is used to this constant warmth, and he works close to the blaze as though it is an old friend. Sparks cling to his apron, leaving little black marks, but he brushes them off without looking. This balance of danger and familiarity is what defines his craft. He needs the fire hot enough to bend iron, but not wild enough to consume his workshop. Here is an interesting fact. Medieval blacksmiths often used charcoal rather than wood, because charcoal burned hotter and more evenly. This detail made a huge difference, since iron cannot be worked at just any temperature. If the heat is too low, the metal resists and cracks. If it is too high, it softens too much or even burns. Historians still argue whether the skill of controlling fire was the most important part of the job, or if it was simply one step among many. Whatever the case, watching the smith handle the blaze feels like watching a master musician tune his instrument. There is also something oddly soothing about the colors of the forge. At first, the coal glows with a dark red, then shifts into orange, and finally bursts into bright yellow flashes when struck by the air from the bellows. The iron, when placed into this glowing bed, changes color too. It goes from black to dull red, to a bright orange that almost hurts your eyes to look at. These colors are not just beautiful, they are signals. They tell the blacksmith when the iron is ready to be shaped. Villagers often stop to stare at this glow. To them, the forge is half practical, half magical. Fire is dangerous, after all, and seeing someone hold it so close, without fear, gives the blacksmith an aura of mystery. Some even whisper that he must know secret charms to keep the fire from leaping out of control. There is a quirky bit of folklore that says a blacksmith could tell the future by watching sparks. A spark that flew high meant good fortune, while one that fell quickly meant trouble ahead. Of course, the smith himself has no time for such tales. He is focused on the task at hand, reading the color of the fire as carefully as a scholar reads a book. The fire also has its sound. It crackles softly when wood burns. It roars when the bellows push too hard, and it hisses when iron is pulled out and dropped into water. This orchestra of sounds fills the workshop and leaks out into the street, so that people walking by always know whether the forge is awake or resting. Combined with the ringing of hammer on anvil, it creates the soundtrack of the village. If you stand here too long, though the heat becomes overwhelming, the blacksmith shifts constantly, stepping back for air, then forward again to pull another piece of iron from the glow. His movements are calm but quick, almost like a dance. There is no hesitation. Each step and reach has been repeated thousands of times before. He knows exactly how long the iron can stay in the fire before it is too soft, and he never wastes that moment. Think about this compared to your own life. We usually treat fire as a simple thing. You strike a match, light a candle, turn on a stove, and forget about it. For the blacksmith, fire is a living presence, something he negotiates with daily. If he misjudges it, the work is ruined. If he tends it carefully, it becomes his greatest ally. That is why his entire morning seems to orbit around this one glowing heart in the corner of his workshop. And so the forge glows brighter, the fire crackles steadily, and the blacksmith moves with practiced confidence. Each strike of the hammer against the glowing iron feels connected to the pulse of the flames. The air is heavy with smoke and heat, but there is no chaos here. Only rhythm, only patience, only the glow of fire that has been coaxed from darkness into steady light. The first real duty of the day is one that never changes. Horses need shoes, and the blacksmith is the one who makes them. In this small village, animals are more than companions. They are workers, carriers, and lifelines. A horse that pulls a wagon of grain or carries a farmer to market cannot move well without strong shoes. If the iron bends, cracks, or wears thin, the animal suffers, and the whole rhythm of the household suffers with it. A farmer enters the workshop leading his mare, a steady grey animal with patient eyes. She snorts as the heat of the forge brushes her nose, shifting her weight on the packed dirt floor. The farmer greets the blacksmith with a nod, and there are few words exchanged. They have done this hundreds of times before. The smith ties the rope to a post, and the horse settles, though her ears flick nervously at the sound of hammering nearby. The blacksmith pulls a bar of iron from the fire, glowing orange, and lays it against the anvil. His hammer rises and falls, shaping the metal into a curved arc. The rhythm is steady, sharp rings echoing into the morning air. Sparks leap, flying past the farmer's boots. The mare stamps her hoof, impatient, but the farmer soothes her with a hand along her neck. In a few minutes, the shoe begins to take its familiar crescent shape. There is a practical artistry in this. The smith does not measure with rulers. He measures with his eyes and hands, adjusting the curve by instinct. When the shape looks right, he quenches the hot shoe in water. Steam bursts up, hissing like a snake, and the smell of hot iron fills the air. The shoe cools quickly, turning from orange to dull grey. Now it is ready to be fitted. You might be surprised to know that horseshoeing has a long history. Roman soldiers used a form of hoof protection made of leather and iron, though it looked different from the nailed shoes used in later centuries. By the medieval period, nailed shoes became common across Europe, and many historians still argue whether this was because of colder climates that hardened the ground, or because of heavier farming that required sturdier animals. What is clear is that without proper shoes, horses could not survive long on rough roads. The mare lifts her hoof reluctantly as the blacksmith bends low. He trims the hoof carefully, scraping away the hard edge, then presses the cooled shoe against it to test the fit. Sometimes it is perfect. Sometimes he needs to reheat and adjust. This one needs a little bending, so back into the fire it goes. The orange glow returns. The hammer rings again, and the curve shifts just enough to match the hooves' natural line. When the smith is satisfied, he places it again, and this time it fits. The nails are slender, pointed, and slightly bent. They are driven into the hoof with quick, practiced taps. The horse does not flinch much, though she tosses her head once in annoyance. The farmer mutters soothing words, and the smith works swiftly. 1 nail, 2, 3, then the shoe is secure. He clips the sharp ends, files the edges smooth, and moves to the next hoof. The process repeats until all 4 hooves are shod, the mare standing quietly once more. Here is a quirky tidbit you may not know. In some villages, old horseshoes were considered lucky charms. People would nail them above doors to protect against bad luck, or hang them on stable walls to keep witches away. Some even buried them under thresholds for extra fortune. Imagine the smith just trying to make a practical tool, while his neighbors treated the same piece of iron as if it were a doorway to magic. By the time the mare is ready, the farmer thanks the smith and slips a few coins into his hand. Payment is modest, but steady work keeps the forge alive. The mare walks more easily now, her hooves ringing lightly on the packed road outside. Another horse will arrive soon, maybe 2 or 3 more before noon. The smith cleans the anvil with a brush, resets his tools, and places another iron bar into the coals. The rhythm will repeat again and again until every animal in need has strong shoes under its feet. Standing here, you notice how ordinary yet essential this work is. Without it, the village would stall. Carts would stop, fields would lie untended, and journeys to nearby towns would take twice as long. The blacksmith may not speak much, but his work speaks loudly in every hoofbeat on the road. Each strike of the hammer is an investment in the smooth running of village life. As the next farmer arrives, leading a bay gelding with a stubborn look in its eye, the forge once again becomes a stage. Fire, iron, hammer, and hoof all come together in a steady pattern, a ritual repeated day after day, year after year. To outsiders, it may seem repetitive. To the villagers, it is survival. The blacksmith's day is not only about horseshoes. Once the animals are cared for, attention turns to the smaller pieces of iron that keep houses, barns, and tools in order. Nails and hinges may seem simple, but in a village like this, they are as essential as bread. Without nails, doors fall apart, carts rattle loose, and furniture splits at the seams. Without hinges, no door swings open, no chest closes, and no gate holds a field secure. These tiny shapes of iron are the quiet foundation of everyday life. The forge glows steadily as the smith pulls a thin rod of iron from the fire. He hammers it quickly, striking until the end tapers to a sharp point. With practiced twists and turns, he flattens the head, making it wide enough to stop the nail from slipping through wood. Each nail takes only a few moments to make. Yet, when you look at the growing pile on the bench, you realize how many strikes it requires. The rhythm is constant, the sound sharp and fast, like rain tapping on stone. Hinges take more patience. A strip of iron is heated, then bent slowly around a rod to form the round loop. Another piece is flattened, shaped into the long arm that will stretch across a door or chest. Together they form the hinge, simple yet strong. The blacksmith knows the weight each hinge must carry, whether it is for a small cupboard door or the heavy gate of a barn. He measures by instinct, shaping each one to match the need. It might surprise you that in some towns, nails were so valuable that people pulled them out of old wood before burning it. A nail was not something to waste. In fact, There are records from the 17th century showing that nails were carefully counted as property, sometimes even listed in wills. Historians still argue whether the scarcity of nails came from limited iron supplies or from the enormous labor required to make each one by hand. Whatever the reason, a barrel of nails was almost like a hidden treasure. There is also a quirky saying tied to hinges. In certain folk tales, squeaky hinges were thought to warn of spirits trying to enter a house. People would ask the blacksmith to make especially tight hinges, not just to keep doors secure, but to keep mischief at bay. Imagine how many times the smith listened to a villager complain that their barn door creaked too much, as if that noise meant more than just poor maintenance. The smith works on, sweat beading along his brow as the nails and hinges take form. He lines them neatly on a shelf, each one waiting for its use. Farmers will come for them soon, carrying requests for replacement parts. Carpenters too will stop by, asking for bags of nails to finish a roof or build a table. The blacksmith does not see the finished houses or barns, but his work holds them together just the same. Children outside often watch the making of nails with more interest than the larger tasks. Perhaps it is because they can imagine holding one of these small pieces in their hand, unlike a heavy horseshoe or axe blade. Some even ask for a spare nail as a toy or a lucky charm. The blacksmith sometimes obliges, handing over a bent one that is not fit for use. The child runs off proudly with the tiny piece of iron, never knowing how many strikes of the hammer gave it shape. Think for a moment about how invisible this work becomes. In your own home, you probably do not notice the nails holding furniture together, or the hinges that let a door swing open. Yet, without them, nothing would function. The same was true in this village. The smith was not praised for every hinge he made, but the absence of one would be felt immediately. In a sense, his work was at its best when no one thought about it at all. As the day moves on, the shelf fills with nails, hinges, latches, and brackets. They look small, almost insignificant, compared to the large horseshoes stacked by the wall. But these are the pieces that keep the village alive in quieter ways. Every creak of a door, every slam of a chest, every fence gate swinging in the wind, all carry the imprint of the blacksmith's steady hands. By the time the morning work has settled into its rhythm, the forge is no longer a private space. The door stands open to let the smoke drift out, and villagers begin to appear one by one. Some come with requests, others simply to talk, and a few just to watch. The blacksmith's workshop is not only a place of labor, it is also a gathering spot, where the quiet pulse of the anvil becomes the background music for small moments of community life. The first visitor is an elderly woman carrying a broken kettle. She explains that the handle has snapped loose, and she cannot boil water without it. The blacksmith takes it gently, turning it in his hands, already planning how to rivet the handle back in place. The woman lingers, telling him about her grandson who is learning to herd goats, about her neighbor who is always borrowing tools and never returning them, and about the weather that seems far too damp for the season. The smith listens with half an ear while his hammer moves steadily. Within minutes, the kettle is repaired and the woman leaves satisfied, her voice still carrying as she heads down the lane. Next comes a farmer, younger and busier, carrying the iron blade of a plough. It is cracked from hitting too many stones in the field. He sets it down heavily on the bench, shaking his head at the wasted morning it cost him. The blacksmith agrees to fix it and begins heating the blade, but the farmer does not leave. Instead, he leans against the post and talks about the harvest, about how the grain looks healthy but the soil is drier than usual. Others who pass by join in the talk, and before long the workshop is buzzing with voices. Here is a small fact that you may not know. In many villages, the blacksmith's shop doubled as a meeting point, almost like a rustic news station. Historians still argue whether this was because the smith's fire attracted people naturally, or because the steady rhythm of his work made it easier for others to linger. Either way, stories and gossip flowed as freely here as at the tavern, but in the bright light of day instead of the haze of drink. There is also a quirky tidbit from folklore. Some people believed that gossip told near an anvil would echo through the iron and spread faster across the village. Of course, no one truly thought iron carried words, but the idea was amusing enough that it sometimes made people laugh when a secret slipped out quickly. Imagine a farmer telling a story here in the morning, only to hear it repeated back at him in the market by the afternoon. Children gather too, pressing close to the doorway, giggling and whispering as they peek at the glowing fire. They are shooed away by their parents, but always return, fascinated by the sparks and the clanging rhythm. Some try to mimic the sound by striking sticks against stones outside, creating their own little orchestra. Their laughter weaves with the steady clang, turning the workshop into a strangely cheerful scene despite the heat and soot. A traveling merchant arrives with a broken cartwheel, one of its iron rims snapped in half. This job will take longer, but he knows the blacksmith is the only one who can fix it. While the smith sets the wheel aside for later, the merchant shares stories of distant towns, tales of larger markets, and strange objects he has seen. The villagers gather closer, listening with wide eyes as he speaks of fabrics dyed in bright colors, coins stamped with unfamiliar kings, and spices that smell so sharp they make you sneeze before you even taste them. The forge becomes a stage, and the blacksmith works quietly in the background as the merchant entertains the small crowd. Not every visitor comes with grand tales. Some arrive with nothing more than a bent nail or a broken latch, embarrassed to trouble the smith with such small things. Yet he treats every request with the same seriousness. To him, a nail is not just a nail. It is part of a roof beam that keeps out the rain, part of a door that guards food stores, part of the life of the household. He repairs, replaces, or remakes, each job done with patient care. It is striking how the forge becomes both noisy and calm at once. Hammers ring, bellows sigh, voices rise in chatter, but beneath it all is a steady sense of order. People come with problems, they leave with solutions. The blacksmith does not speak much, but his work answers their needs better than words ever could. Think for a moment about how this contrasts with our world. Today, when something small breaks, people often throw it away. In this village, nothing is wasted. Every broken pot, every bent tool, every cracked hinge is worth saving. Repair is not just thrift, it is survival. The blacksmith is the one who ensures that survival continues, one small repair at a time. As the crowd thins and villagers return to their duties, the forge grows quiet again. Only the steady hum of the fire and the clang of the hammer remain. The smith wipes his hands, adjusts the bellows, and prepares for the next task, knowing that before the day is done, more neighbors will appear at his door. Children are never far away from the forge. Even when their parents warn them not to play near the heat, curiosity wins. They gather in small groups near the doorway, peeking in with wide eyes, sometimes whispering, sometimes daring each other to step a little closer. To them, the forge is a place of wonder. The flames glow brighter than any candle, the sparks leap like living insects, and the ringing hammer sounds like a drumbeat in a never-ending song. A little boy crouches near the doorway, clutching a stick. He mimics the smith, striking it against a rock, smiling as the sharp tapping sound echoes faintly. His sister giggles, holding her hands over her ears when the real hammer falls harder. The blacksmith glances at them once in a while, his face stern, though there is a softness in his eyes. He knows they are fascinated. He also knows they are not the first children to be drawn to this fire, and they will not be the last. Parents arrive to collect them, scolding gently, warning them about sparks and burns. Yet even the parents find it hard not to linger for a moment. Watching the glow of the forge, they remember their own childhoods, when they too pressed their faces to this doorway and marveled at the same fire. The forge is more than a workshop. It is part of the memory of the village itself. Sometimes the blacksmith lets the children step inside for a moment, under strict watch. He shows them a nail or a small piece of iron cooled enough to touch. Their fingers close around it with delight, as if holding treasure. They pass it between them like a secret prize, their voices hushed but excited. These little gifts often end up tied to a string and worn as charms, even though the iron is ordinary. To a child, it is a piece of the mysterious, glowing world they are not yet allowed to enter fully. Here is a curious fact. In many cultures, blacksmiths were surrounded by a certain awe, even fear, because they could shape metal with fire. Some communities treated them with respect, bordering on superstition, believing they held powers that others did not. Historians still argue whether this aura came from genuine skill alone, or from the way fire seemed untouchable to ordinary people. Whatever the reason, children often saw the smith as both magician and craftsman. There is also a quirky little belief tied to children near the forge. In some traditions, sparks landing on a child's clothes were seen as blessings for strength. Parents sometimes pretended to scold their children for sneaking too close, while secretly hoping a stray spark would land nearby. Of course, the blacksmith himself shook his head at such talk, more concerned about safety than superstition. Yet, he knew these stories gave his forge an air of mystery that kept it alive in village imagination. The children loved the sound of the anvil most of all. Every strike seems like thunder to them, loud and echoing. They copy it with claps, with stomps, even with buckets turned upside down. When the smith pauses to work with tongs or bellows, they grow restless, waiting for the next clang. When it comes, they cheer softly, as though they are hearing the beat of a drum in a festival. The sound carries into their games, so that in the evening, when they play in the fields, you hear faint rhythms of clapping and shouting that echo the forge. One boy is braver than the rest. He asks questions loudly, pointing to the bellows, the anvil, the glowing fire. The smith answers briefly, sometimes with a grunt, sometimes with a simple phrase. But even these small answers feed the boy's imagination. He begins to talk about how he will be a smith one day, how he will make swords and great chains and mighty gates. His friends laugh, but you can see the spark of ambition in his eyes. Think for a moment about how powerful such small exposures can be. A child watching a forge today might be distracted by dozens of other marvels. But in this village, the forge is the brightest spectacle they know. It is both dangerous and inviting, forbidden yet irresistible. The blacksmith may think of himself as ordinary, but to the children he is a figure larger than life. The day drifts on. The children come and go, their laughter mixing with the clang of iron. Sometimes they are sent away firmly, but they always return, drawn by the same fascination. And as the smith works, he cannot help but feel their eyes on him, a silent reminder that his steady labor is more than survival. It is a story unfolding. A story that the youngest villagers will carry with them long after they grow older and take up work of their own. When the stream of children fades and the morning chatter dies down, the blacksmith turns his attention to another steady part of his day, repairing old tools. This is the quiet heart of his work. The place where broken objects return to life. In a farming village, tools are as precious as bread. A cracked axe cannot split wood for the hearth. A dull sickle cannot cut the grain. A plowshare bent out of shape cannot dig the soil. The blacksmith's hands give these tired pieces of iron a second chance. The first repair today is a farmer's axe, its head chipped from striking stone in the woods. The smith lays it on the bench, turning it over, his fingers tracing the rough edge. He heats it slowly in the fire until the dull grey turns a glowing orange. On the anvil, The hammer falls in careful strikes, each blow reshaping the edge. Sparks leap outward, and the ringing sound echoes across the workshop. With patient movements, he draws the iron thin, then sharpens it on a grinding stone until the blade gleams again. When he hands it back, it is not a new tool, but it is ready to serve many more seasons. Next comes a plowshare, heavier and more stubborn. Its surface is cracked, the mark of hard soil and too many stones. The blacksmith heats it carefully, then begins to hammer along the fracture, welding the crack shut with rhythmic precision. The fire roars when he sprinkles a bit of sand across the joint, the grains melting instantly, helping the iron fuse together. Villagers watch in awe at how something broken becomes whole again under his steady hand. For them, it is more than craft, it is transformation. Here is an interesting historical detail. In some medieval records, farmers were actually fined if they let tools grow to worn before bringing them to the smith. The idea was simple. A dull tool wasted time, and wasted time meant wasted harvest. Historians still argue whether such fines were enforced strictly or if they were more symbolic reminders. Either way, it shows how deeply the health of tools was tied to the survival of the whole village. There is also a quirky little practice worth noting. Some people believed that if you sharpened a scythe during a new moon, it would cut grass faster. Others insisted that repairs done on certain feast days would bring better harvests. The blacksmith often heard such requests, villagers asking him to time his work according to the phases of the sky. He humored them sometimes, but mostly he smiled quietly, knowing that the real magic was patience and skill, not moonlight. Knives arrive in bundles, dull from weeks of cutting bread, meat, or rope. The smith sharpens them one by one, sparks dancing from the stone wheel as the edge regains its bite. Each knife may belong to a different household, but they all pass through his hands, becoming sharper, safer, and ready again for daily use. The steady whir of the grinding wheel is almost hypnotic, a softer sound than the hammer, but no less important. Children sometimes watch this part too, entranced by the shower of tiny sparks that spill like stars. Carts are another common patient of the forge. Their iron rims crack, their bolts snap, their axles grind loose. A merchant or farmer arrives with a broken wheel, setting it down heavily on the floor. The smith examines it, reheats the rim, and begins to hammer it back into place. The work is slow, but when the wheel is whole again, the cart will roll smoother than before. The relief on the owner's face is visible. A cart means trade, movement, connection to the outside world. Without it, isolation presses in. Think about how, in your own life, broken objects are often thrown away. But in this world, every object holds value. Iron is scarce, labor is precious, and nothing is wasted. Repair is not only thrift, it is respect for the material, for the time it took to make it, for the work it still has left to give. The blacksmith is the guardian of that respect. the one who refuses to let useful things die too soon. As the afternoon drifts on, the pile of repaired tools grows larger. An axe gleams with a sharper edge. A scythe shines with renewed life. A plowshare is mended, ready to return to the earth. Each piece carries the marks of the forge, the memory of heat and hammer. Villagers come to collect their tools, leaving with gratitude and a few coins. But more importantly, with the knowledge that their work can continue. The forge hums with this quiet industry. There is no grand ceremony, no celebration, just the steady flow of broken things becoming useful again. The blacksmith wipes sweat from his brow, adjusts his apron, and reaches for the next object. To him, it is all routine. To the village, it is the difference between struggle and survival. By late afternoon, thoughts begin to shift toward the coming market day. In a small village, the weekly market is the moment when trade, chatter, and livelihood all converge. The blacksmith plays his role in this cycle, not by shouting in the square or weighing sacks of grain, but by preparing the small but vital pieces of iron that others will carry there to sell or barter. He begins by laying out his recent work. Horseshoes are stacked in a neat pile. Nails are counted into small wooden boxes, and hinges are arranged by size. Each piece is inspected carefully. A nail too short will split wood. A hinge not quite aligned will creak or break. The blacksmith does not allow such mistakes to leave his workshop. He polishes each surface with an oiled rag, not for decoration, but to keep the iron from rusting in the damp night air. The workshop smells of smoke, iron, and oil, an earthy blend that clings to everything. A farmer stops by with a request for 2 sets of hinges, explaining that his barn door must be ready before the weekend. The smith nods, adds the hinges to a small pile, and makes a note in his mind of the coins he will collect tomorrow. Another villager arrives, asking for nails in bulk, planning to repair a roof before the rainy season grows heavier. Each request adds to the steady rhythm of preparation. Here is a useful historical fact. In many medieval villages, blacksmiths were not only producers but also suppliers, organizing their work in time for market days so that the community would have what it needed. Historians still argue whether the smith's income came more from constant repairs or from these planned bursts of sales. What seems certain is that without these regular cycles of preparation, the economy of the village would stumble. There is also a quirky little tradition connected to markets. Some people believed that buying iron items at dawn brought better luck, as the morning air carried blessings for the week ahead. Others swore that nails bought on a cloudy day would hold wood tighter. These small beliefs gave villagers excuses to hurry or delay their purchases, and they gave the smith a steady trickle of stories to smile at as he worked. The blacksmith himself is not a man of markets. He prefers the steady glow of his forge, the rhythm of hammer and bellows, the silence that comes when others leave. Yet he knows the importance of being ready. Market day is when his work spreads beyond the village. A traveling merchant might buy a bag of nails to carry to another town. A farmer from a neighboring hamlet might come looking for hinges or tools. In this way, the quiet labor of the forge ripples outward, touching lives he may never see. Children sneak in again as he sorts the items, watching him count the nails with slow care. They whisper guesses, trying to predict how many nails will fill one small box. When the number is revealed, they giggle at their mistakes. The smith lets them hold 1 or 2 nails, their little fingers closing tightly as if clutching treasure. They run off to boast to their friends that they helped the blacksmith prepare for market. The workshop grows crowded as evening approaches. Farmers bring coins in advance, hoping to reserve what they need. Carpenters stop by to discuss large projects, hinting at how many nails they might require. Even the miller arrives, requesting new iron bands for the grinding wheel. The forge feels less like a private workshop and more like a busy stall before the stall itself even reaches the square. Think for a moment about how market days serve as lifelines. In modern times, you can buy almost anything instantly. But here, the market is the one chance each week to trade, to sell, to connect. If the blacksmith is not ready, doors remain broken, roofs remain leaky, and carts remain stalled. Preparation is not simply tidying shelves. It is ensuring the flow of village life continues smoothly into the next week. The blacksmith ties the nails into bundles with twine, stacks the hinges carefully in a wooden chest, and lines the horseshoes in neat rows. The glow of the forge flickers across these piles, turning ordinary iron into something almost golden. He wipes his hands on his apron, sighs, and glances at the door. The night air is cooler now, and a scent of cooking drifts from nearby cottages. Tomorrow will be busy, but tonight is for quiet readiness. The clang of the hammer softens as the sun climbs higher. Even the most tireless blacksmith knows when to rest. The forge still glows, but the rhythm of work eases into a quieter pace. The heat inside the workshop has grown heavy, pressing against skin and breath. Sweat runs down the blacksmith's brow and soaks into his linen shirt. He sets the hammer aside and wipes his hands slowly, taking a moment to breathe. This is the midday pause, the part of the day when work must yield to the body's need for food and reflection. He steps outside into the narrow lane, blinking at the bright light. After hours inside the smoky forge, the open air feels almost too sharp. The sounds of the village surround him. Hens cluck and scratch at the dust. A dog barks lazily at a cart rolling by. Children laugh in the distance, their voices echoing off cottage walls. The air smells of baking bread, earthy and warm, mixed with herbs drying in the sun from nearby windowsills. The rhythm of the village is alive, but softer now, as if it too is slowing for the middle of the day. The blacksmith carries a small loaf of bread wrapped in cloth, along with a wedge of cheese. He sits on a low bench outside the workshop, stretching his legs and feeling the sun on his face. Each bite is plain, but after hours of labor, the simple meal feels like a feast. He eats slowly, chewing carefully, watching the life of the street pass by. Farmers lead their animals toward shaded troughs. A weaver hurries past, carrying a bundle of cloth. The miller's apprentice pushes a heavy sack of grain toward the river. The world keeps turning, but at a gentler pace. Here is a fact worth pausing on. In medieval Europe, workers often ate several smaller meals rather than the 3 large ones familiar today. Bread, cheese, and ale were common staples, with meat saved for special occasions. Historians still argue whether this routine was born of necessity or tradition, but many agree that the rhythm of work dictated the rhythm of eating. The blacksmith's pause at midday reflects this balance, a moment of nourishment before the hammer sings again. There is a quirky saying tied to this habit. Some villagers believed that eating while the sun stood highest gave strength for the whole afternoon. Others claimed that pausing to eat in silence at noon would ward off bad dreams that night. Whether true or not, the blacksmith often finds himself eating quietly, savoring the calm, as if even silence itself can be food. He watches as children chase one another past his bench, their wooden toys clattering against the cobblestones. One stops to wave shyly at him, holding up a bent nail she treasures from earlier in the day. He nods, smiling faintly, before returning to his bread. Such small interruptions remind him that his work travels into homes and lives in ways he does not always see. After finishing his meal, he takes a sip from a clay jug of water, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. The sun is strong now, warming his shoulders, but the shade of the forge calls him back. He lingers a little longer, though, listening to the steady hum of bees moving among flowers in a garden nearby. For a moment, the world feels perfectly still, the kind of stillness that makes you drowsy if you sit too long. Think of how rare such pauses can feel. The blacksmith's life is filled with clanging, smoke, sweat, and endless requests. Yet here, in this short slice of day, he allows himself the gift of stillness. It is not luxury, it is necessity. His muscles need the break, his mind needs the calm, and his fire needs the time to settle before roaring again. Villagers pass and nod, some calling greetings, others leaving him in peace. A few stop briefly to ask when their tools will be ready, but most respect the quiet moment. They too are pausing, eating meals in their cottages, resting in shaded fields, letting the middle of the day slip by with patience. When the bread is gone and the jug is nearly empty, the blacksmith rises slowly, brushing crumbs from his lap. He stretches his arms and shoulders, feeling the weight of the morning lift slightly. He glances once at the sky, the blue washed with white clouds drifting lazily overhead. The village breathes with him, calm and steady, ready for the work that will follow. And so he steps back into the forge. The glow is waiting. The tools are waiting. The afternoon is waiting. But for this small pause, he has allowed himself to simply be. A man sitting in the sun, with bread in his hands and silence in his ears. The afternoon settles into a quieter rhythm, and the blacksmith continues his work. But his mind is not only on the iron in front of him. His hands move with practiced confidence. Yet behind each strike lies a memory of lessons learned long ago. The forge is not only a place of labor, it is a vessel of tradition, carrying the voices of those who shaped metal before him. The blacksmith's father was a smith too, and his grandfather before that. He remembers watching as a child, standing in the very same doorway where children now gather, wide-eyed at the glow of the fire. Back then, the hammer seemed impossibly heavy, the fire impossibly hot. His father's hands moved with the same steady rhythm he now carries, the same balance of patience and force. Even when he first tried to lift the hammer, it wobbled in his grip, but his father only nodded, telling him that strength would come, and so would control. Tradition is not taught in books here. It is taught through repetition, through long hours of watching and copying. The blacksmith remembers being told to sweep the floor, to pump the bellows, to carry water for quenching. Each small task seemed unimportant at the time, yet each one taught him about the forge. He learned how the fire breathes, how the iron sings, how the rhythm of a day unfolds. Slowly, the lessons built upon each other, until one day he realized he was no longer watching. He was the one holding the hammer, shaping the metal, carrying the craft forward. Here is a fact worth noting. Archaeological finds show that smithing traditions often lasted for generations within the same families. Historians still argue whether this was because the knowledge was difficult to pass to outsiders, or because communities preferred to trust the same family line with such vital work. Either way, smithing often carried with it not just skill but lineage, a thread tying one century to the next. There is a quirky belief tied to this inheritance as well. In some regions, people said that if a blacksmith died without teaching his craft, the spirit of the anvil would grow restless, causing strange noises at night. Villagers would sometimes urge an aging smith to take on an apprentice quickly, fearing the forge would become haunted if left silent. Such stories may sound fanciful, but they reveal the deep connection people felt between skill, memory, and community survival. The blacksmith looks around his workshop and sees more than tools. He sees echoes of the past. The bellows patched with leather remind him of his father's careful repairs. The anvil, scarred and pitted, carries marks that may have been struck decades before his own hands ever touched it. Even the way the light falls through the open door in the afternoon reminds him of younger years, when he watched the same pattern of shadows shift across the floor while he dreamed of becoming a smith himself. And he knows, though he may not say it aloud, that children watching him now could one day carry this forward. Perhaps not his own son, perhaps not his own daughter, but someone will step into the rhythm, will take up the hammer when his hands are too old, That thought comforts him. The forge is not only his, it belongs to the village, and the craft will continue as long as there are hands willing to hold iron against fire. Think for a moment about how knowledge flows in your own life. Today, you can search for answers instantly. Find instructions in a book or a glowing screen. For the blacksmith, learning was slower, woven into the fabric of daily work. Nothing was written down, yet nothing was forgotten. The forge itself was the book, the hammer, the pen, and each strike a lesson recorded in sound and memory. Sometimes he recalls the sayings his father repeated, small pieces of wisdom passed along with the rhythm of the hammer. Do not strike too soon, or the iron will resist. Do not strike too late, or the fire will swallow its strength. Every tool has its moment, every hand its measure. These words come back to him even now, guiding him silently as he works. They are not grand philosophies, but they are truths born of sweat and flame. The forge glows steadily, and the blacksmith feels the weight of time pressing gently against his shoulders. He is one link in a chain that stretches backward into memory and forward into possibility. His work today will outlast him. The hinges he shapes, the nails he sharpens, the wheels he repairs, all of these will continue their service long after he has laid down his hammer. Tradition is not only in what he remembers, it is in what he leaves behind. The forge looks steady, calm even, but every moment of the blacksmith's work carries danger. The fire glows beautifully, the hammer rings rhythmically, the tools look dependable, yet beneath this ordinary surface lies a constant risk. The blacksmith accepts this quietly, the way a sailor accepts the sea. He does not dwell on it, but he knows it well. Burns are the most common hazard. A single spark can leap from the fire and land on bare skin. Most sparks cool before they sting, but some bite deep, leaving small scars across the smith's arms and hands. His apron is marked with black spots where embers burned through the leather. His fingers are lined with calluses and pale marks from old blisters. When he quenches hot iron in water, steam bursts up violently, and if his hand is too close, the scalding mist leaves its mark. These injuries are ordinary to him, as natural as scratches to a farmer or splinters to a carpenter. Smoke is another constant companion. It curls through the workshop, stinging the eyes, scratching the throat. On damp days, it clings to the rafters and refuses to rise. The blacksmith coughs sometimes, rubbing his eyes, wiping soot from his cheeks. His lungs bear the memory of years of smoke, though he rarely complains. For him, it is part of the trade, as inseparable as the hammer from the anvil. Here is a fact worth noting. Historical records describe smiths suffering from chronic lung problems caused by constant smoke inhalation. Some wore cloths over their mouths, though this offered little real protection. Historians still argue whether such health risks shortened the lives of smiths compared to other villagers, or if their strong bodies from heavy labor balanced the harm. Either way, The forge was not only a place of creation, but also a slow hazard to the one who worked it. There are more dramatic dangers to a hammer can slip, striking a finger instead of iron. A piece of metal can shatter unexpectedly, sending shards flying across the workshop. The bellows can catch fire if sparks leap too far. The roof beams, dry from years of smoke, could ignite if care is not constant. The blacksmith knows these risks, and his careful movements are shaped by them. His hands are steady not only from skill, but from caution learned through hard experience. Villagers are aware of these dangers as well. Some enter the workshop cautiously, standing near the door, unwilling to approach too close to the fire. Others linger, but keep their children at a distance, scolding them for stepping forward. The forge has a pull of fascination, but everyone respects its hidden teeth. There is also a quirky thread of folklore connected to these dangers. In certain villages, people believed that a blacksmith who survived many burns without complaint would gain special protection, almost like an invisible shield. Others whispered that scars on a smith's hands were marks of favor from spirits of fire. The blacksmith himself does not care for such stories. To him, scars are only reminders of carelessness, lessons written on skin. Yet he knows these tales soften the fear of fire for the villagers who rely on him. Accidents sometimes draw the whole community. If the forge flares too brightly, neighbors rush with buckets of water, shouting warnings, forming a chain to pass water from the well. Even though the blacksmith is the one closest to the danger, the village understands that the forge belongs to them all. Protecting it means protecting their livelihood. Think about how different this is from modern safety. Today, gloves, masks, and shields protect workers from burns and smoke. Here, the blacksmith relies only on his apron, his reflexes, and his stubborn endurance. He accepts every scar as the price of his craft. There is no complaint, no question of avoiding risk. The work must be done, and so he does it. As the day goes on, the dangers remain present but quiet, like shadows at the edge of the firelight. The blacksmith works steadily, aware of them, but not slowed by them. His hammer falls, the sparks leap, the smoke curls, and life goes on. The risks are part of the rhythm, as ordinary as the tasks themselves. For the villagers, the forge is a place of creation. For the blacksmith, it is also a place of constant, silent testing, where every movement balances between safety and harm. As the sun drifts lower in the sky, the forge does not quiet down. Instead, the work seems to gather speed, as if the fading light presses both blacksmith and villagers to finish what must be done before night closes in. The orange glow of the fire grows more striking against the dimming air outside, a beacon that draws people through the lane. The blacksmith wipes his brow and sets his shoulders. He knows the pattern of this hour well. It is the busiest part of the day, the time when people bring their final requests, eager to collect their tools before heading home to supper. The workshop fills again with footsteps, voices, and the shuffle of boots across packed earth. one farmer arrives with a broken hoe, the wooden handle intact, but the iron blade worn thin and dull. He places it down with urgency, explaining that the weeds in his field will not wait until tomorrow. The blacksmith nods and places the blade into the fire, heating it until it glows. His hammer reshapes the edge, sparks flying in steady arcs. Within minutes, the hoe is sharp again, ready for work at first light. The farmer leaves with gratitude, promising to return with payment when the harvest comes in. Another visitor brings a cooking pot, its handle cracked where it joins the rim. The smith repairs it quickly with a rivet and a strong strike of the hammer. The pot is returned whole again, just as the woman's children peek around her legs, whispering in awe at the glow of the fire. She laughs softly and hurries them away, pot clutched tightly in her hands. The stream does not end. A carpenter arrives to ask for nails by the bundle. A shepherd stops in for a small knife, explaining that his flock has been restless and he needs a reliable blade to cut tangled wool. Even the priest of the village walks in, holding a metal candlestick bent awkwardly to one side. The blacksmith straightens it with a few careful strikes, returning it with a respectful nod. Each request seems small, but each is urgent to the one who brings it. Here is a fact worth noting. Historical accounts describe blacksmiths as some of the busiest workers in their communities, often finishing tasks long after other trades had ended for the day. Historians still argue whether this reflected the constant demand for iron or simply the rhythm of village life that left repairs until evening. Either way, the blacksmith's day rarely ended when the sun dipped low. The forge continued glowing even when most households turned to supper. There is also a quirky little practice tied to evening work. Some villagers believed that items repaired at night carried extra strength. Since the fire burned hotter after dark when the air was cooler outside, others whispered that the sound of a hammer at night scared away spirits wandering through the lanes. Whether superstition or comfort, people often brought their work at dusk, trusting in the forge to guard both their tools and their homes. The blacksmith moves steadily, neither rushing nor resting. His arms ache, his shoulders are heavy, yet he keeps the rhythm. Each hammer strike is a promise kept. Each finished repair is one less worry for his neighbors. The glow of the fire grows brighter as darkness deepens beyond the doorway, turning the workshop into a pool of light in the gathering night. Children return again, even though their parents call them to supper. They hover at the doorway, drawn by the glow that seems stronger now, the sparks more visible in the dim air. Their laughter softens into whispers, their eyes wide with fascination. To them, the forge at night looks more magical than ever, like a hidden treasure glowing in the heart of the village. Think of how ordinary this might seem to the blacksmith. To him, it is only another long evening, his hands working as they always do. But to the villagers outside, the sight of glowing fire and ringing iron is reassurance. It means life continues, It means work is done. It means tomorrow will arrive with tools sharp and hinges strong. The evening workload continues until his bench is clear. Nails bundled, hinges stacked, tools sharpened and set aside. Each villager leaves with gratitude, carrying not only iron but also the quiet confidence that the forge brings. The blacksmith straightens his back, stretches his aching arms, and lets the fire settle slightly, though it will not rest fully until the day itself is ended. The sky outside is darker now, streaked with fading light. The lane is quieter as people settle into their homes. The forge remains a small island of sound, a place where work still hums even as the world prepares for rest. As the evening deepens, the work begins to slow. The busiest rush is over. Most villagers have collected their tools, and the steady line of visitors fades into a few lingering figures. The forge still glows, but its heat feels gentler now, a companion rather than a demand. This is the hour when voices grow quieter, when conversations rise naturally in the dim light of the workshop. The blacksmith adjusts the bellows slowly, coaxing the fire into a steady hum. His hammer rests on the bench, and in the pause between tasks, neighbors lean against the doorway or sit on low stools, their voices weaving with the crackle of the fire. These are not urgent requests or hurried exchanges. They are simple talks, the kind that unfold easily when the day has lost its sharpness. A farmer tells of a stubborn ox that refused to plough straight lines, turning every furrow crooked. Another laughs about a goose that chased children across the lane until they scrambled over a fence. The blacksmith listens, sometimes offering a word, sometimes only nodding, his hands busy shaping a final hinge. The rhythm of his work slows, blending into the rhythm of their words. Here is a fact worth noticing. In many communities, blacksmith shops were places of gathering as much as they were workshops. Historians still argue whether this role was deliberate or accidental. But there is no doubt that people lingered at forges not only for repairs but also for company. The glow of the fire, the comfort of steady labor, and the chance to share small stories turned the forge into a kind of evening hearth for the whole village. There is also a quirky superstition tied to these conversations. Some villagers believed that telling secrets near the anvil would bind them in iron, making them harder to spread. Lovers sometimes whispered promises here, convinced that the clang of the hammer would seal their words. Whether true or not, the forge became a place where words carried a little more weight, where stories spoken in the glow seemed to sink deeper into memory. The blacksmith is not a man of many words, but he values these moments. His silence is not distance, it is listening. As others speak, he keeps his hammer moving softly, tapping rather than striking, shaping the last pieces of the day. The sound of his work becomes part of the conversation, a gentle beat that marks the passing of time. Children, still restless despite the darkening sky, settle near the doorway with drowsy eyes. Their laughter has softened into murmurs. They lean against one another, half asleep, lulled by the sound of adults talking and iron ringing faintly. The forge, which seemed dangerous and thrilling earlier, now feels almost like a cradle, its warmth wrapping around them in the cool night air. Think for a moment about how much of human history is built on such simple scenes. Work winding down, voices gathering, fire glowing, stories flowing. No records will write about this evening. No chronicles will mention the way a farmer laughed about his goose. No parchment will preserve the faint smile on the blacksmith's face. Yet these are the moments that carried villages through time, the small threads that wove together days into years. The blacksmith straightens the last hinge and sets it aside. He wipes his hands slowly, listening as the stories drift into softer tones. A neighbor begins speaking of the harvest festival that will come in a few weeks, recalling last year's music and dancing. Another murmurs about a relative in a faraway town, wondering if they will visit before winter. The words are not urgent, not sharp. They are as steady as the glowing fire, as patient as the stars beginning to appear in the sky. The forge holds these voices gently. The fire flickers, the anvil rests, and the blacksmith sits quietly among his neighbors. He is not only the one who shapes iron for this hour, he is also part of the shared story of the village, a silent keeper of words as much as a keeper of tools. Night is settling across the village, and the forge begins to grow quieter. The busiest hours are behind, the repairs finished, the requests answered. Yet the blacksmith does not simply close the door and leave. The end of the day at the forge is its own careful ritual, a winding down of fire, tools, and spirit. The fire still glows, its core deep red, now rather than bright orange. The blacksmith lowers the bellows slowly, no longer forcing the coals into sudden flares. Instead, he lets them breathe on their own, fading little by little. The heat softens, but it still radiates into the room, wrapping the workshop in a final blanket of warmth. He sprinkles a few handfuls of ash across the top, a simple act that smothers the flame gently, ensuring it will sleep until morning. The smoke curls upward, thin and ghostly, carrying the scent of the day's labor into the dark sky. The tools, too, must rest. Hammers are placed back on their hooks, tongs are leaned neatly along the bench, and the grinding stone is brushed clean of sparks and filings. The anvil, scarred and pitted, receives a final wipe of cloth. Its surface shines faintly in the firelight, a quiet reminder of all the blows it has endured through the day. The blacksmith rests his hand on it for a moment, as if acknowledging its partnership. Tomorrow the strikes will begin again, but for tonight it is allowed to be silent. Outside, the village has grown hushed. Dogs bark faintly in the distance, then fall quiet. The last of the children are called in by their parents, their laughter fading into the muffled warmth of cottages. Windows glow with candlelight, and the smell of supper lingers in the air, thick with stews and fresh bread. Crickets begin their chorus in the fields, filling the gaps left by the silence of the streets. The forge stands as a pool of light in this darkened world, its doorway open, its glow steady, until even that begins to dim. There is something comforting about this closing moment. The forge, which had been a place of heat, noise, and constant movement, now feels almost like a quiet shrine. The blacksmith moves slowly, no longer rushing, his body heavy with the weight of labor. He lowers the shutters across the windows, one by one, listening as the sounds of the village soften further. The workshop seems to sigh with him, relieved to be at rest. Here is a fact that adds to this stillness. Historical accounts note that smiths often left a small ember alive beneath the ash, so that in the morning they could coax the fire back with less effort. Historians still argue whether this was a practical choice alone, or whether it also carried symbolic meaning. The ember serving as a thread that tied one day of work to the next. Either way, it meant that even in sleep, the forge never truly died. There is also a curious bit of folklore. Some villagers believed that a sleeping forge listened to dreams. If you walked past it at night and whispered your hope into the open air, the embers would carry it upward with the smoke, delivering it to unseen ears. Children, in particular, loved this idea, pausing by the shuttered doorway to murmur wishes about new toys, good harvests, or the safe return of a father from a journey. Whether the blacksmith ever knew of these whispered hopes is unclear, but his forge became a vessel for them all the same. The blacksmith finishes his final task. He sweeps the floor, gathering ashes and fragments of iron into a small pile. The room looks clean enough, though soot still lingers on every beam and corner. He removes his apron, heavy with burns and marks, and hangs it carefully. His arms feel sore, his back aches, yet there is satisfaction in the fatigue. Today's work is done. Tomorrow's will come soon enough. He steps outside at last, pulling the door closed behind him. The lane is nearly empty now. Only the distant murmur of voices carries from a tavern at the edge of the square. The stars shine faintly above, their light cold against the lingering warmth of the forge. He takes a deep breath, letting the cool night air clear his lungs of smoke. The smell of iron still clings to him, but beyond that, he tastes the freshness of the evening. The forge stands dark behind him, but not forgotten. It will wait patiently through the night, its ember hidden, its tools resting. Tomorrow the bellows will sigh again, the hammer will ring, the fire will roar. But tonight it rests, as he rests, as the village rests, all tied together in the rhythm of labor and sleep. Now the story softens further, and the edges blur. Imagine the village wrapped in quiet. The fields are still, the cottages glow faintly, and the forge has folded into the silence. The fire is no longer bright. It is only a hidden ember, a small breath of warmth under layers of ash. The anvil no longer rings. It waits, steady and silent. The tools, once busy and loud, hang still in the dim light. Picture the blacksmith lying in his small bed, his arms heavy, his mind drifting. The weight of the day slips away, one task at a time. The horseshoes are finished, the hinges are stacked, the tools are mended. There is nothing left undone. His breath slows, steady as the bellows he worked earlier, in and out, soft and calm. The night outside is gentle. Stars scatter across the sky, faint and countless. A cool breeze moves through the lanes, carrying the scent of fields and wood smoke. Crickets hum quietly in the grass, their rhythm joining with the faint murmur of the river beyond the cottages. Every sound is softened, stretched, as if the world itself is breathing slower. Let yourself rest here. Imagine the glow of the ember fading, the quiet of the village deepening, the steady breath of the blacksmith carrying you along. There is no need to hurry, no need to hold on to the day. It is finished, it is complete, it is at peace. Allow your own thoughts to drift like smoke into the night sky. Feel your body loosen, your shoulders heavy, your eyes calm. The forge is quiet, the village is quiet. You are quiet. Sleep gathers gently, slowly, softly, carrying you into its steady warmth.